The United Kingdom is under siege, but not from some foreign invader. No, the enemy is far more cunning. It's economic, and it's attacking from within. In 2023, over 3 million emergency food parcels were handed out by the Trussell Trust, the UK's largest food bank network. That's a 37% increase from the previous year and more than double the number from just 5 years ago. This is in a country that once ruled over an empire. Now, millions rely on handouts for their next meal. Food banks, which were meant to be temporary, have become as common as pubs from London to Manchester and Glasgow to Cardiff. This isn't just a bump in the road, it's the new reality. The UK is struggling to feed its people. Talk about a fall from grace. But hey, if you think food insecurity is bad, buckle up. It's just the appetizer in this buffet of economic woes. The cost of living crisis is pushing families into poverty faster than you can say austerity. The energy crisis has been particularly brutal, forcing households into a modern-day version of Sophie's Choice: heat the home or fill the fridge. Back in April 2022, energy bills shot up by over 50%, leaving millions of families in a painful bind. And just when you thought you could relax, thinking things might improve, hold on to your tea. Energy costs in early 2024 are still 20% higher than they were in 2021. And it gets better. Britain is a proud member of a rather unique club. It's the only high-income country that has been honored with a poverty survey from the UN. Back in 2018, a UN expert dropped by and wasn't just surprised, he was utterly gobsmacked to discover that in the land of tea and crumpets, 1/5 of the population, 14 million people, were living in poverty, with 1.5 million in outright destitution. You'd think having the 6th largest economy would spare you that kind of embarrassment, right? Now, let's talk about the UK's productivity, or the severe lack of it. For the past 15 years, productivity in the UK has been moving slower than a sloth on sedatives. This silent killer has choked economic growth, strangled wages, and sent living standards into a nosedive. If productivity had kept up with its pre-2008 pace, the UK economy could be nearly 30% larger today. Instead, wages have flatlined. In real terms, workers are now earning less than they did in 2008. According to the Resolution Foundation, the average worker has been shortchanged by around £10,700 a year. Middle-income Brits are now significantly worse off compared to their European peers, 20% poorer than workers in Germany and 9% poorer than those in France. Since 2010, while incomes in France jumped by a healthy 34% and Germany enjoyed a solid 27% rise, the UK decided to take a more creative approach. Rather than going up, incomes in Britain somehow managed to fall by 2%. It's like watching your neighbors build shiny new extensions while your own roof is leaking. If incomes were a race, the UK didn't just lose. It tripped, rolled down a hill, and somehow ended up running backward. Meanwhile, tax revenue as a percentage of GDP hit 36.3% in 2023, the highest since the 1940s. And at the same time, the UK's national debt has ballooned to £2.69 trillion, about 97.8% of GDP. Sure, that's a tiny bit better than the 2022 peak of 103%, but let's not get too excited. The cost of servicing this debt hit £120 billion in the 2023 to 24 fiscal year. That's more than double the amount paid just 3 years earlier. For context, that £60 billion increase alone could fund the entire education system, and there would still be enough left over for a round at the pub. Compare that to Germany, where the debt-to-GDP ratio sits at 69% and the country only spends 3.9% of its GDP on servicing debt, compared to the UK's 8.1%. And then there's austerity. After the 2008 financial crash, the UK government thought it would be brilliant to embark on a decade of austerity, slashing over £30 billion from public services between 2010 and 2019. Instead of stabilizing the economy, these cuts left it wobbling like a Jenga tower in an earthquake. critical sectors like healthcare, education, and infrastructure were starved of resources. The National Health Service, NHS, is the poster child for these short-sighted policies. By September 2023, the NHS waiting list in England hit a record 7.8 million people. That's more than the entire population of Scotland, all twiddling their thumbs, waiting for treatment. Meanwhile, courts are still operating below capacity with a backlog of over 400,000 cases in the Crown Court by early 2024. It's the perfect storm of high taxes, high debt, and public services that are as reliable as British weather. Let's not forget the UK's brilliant decision to go all in on financial services back in the 1980s. Under Margaret Thatcher, the UK transformed London into a glittering financial hub, letting the City of London flourish while manufacturing withered away. In the 1970s, manufacturing was the UK's bread and butter, making up 30% of GDP. Today, a measly 10%. This one-trick pony strategy left many regions outside of London struggling with few economic opportunities. It's like the UK decided to be a show pony, but when the 2008 financial crisis hit, the pony stumbled hard, and it still hasn't gotten back on its feet. While the City of London continues to contribute up to 12% of UK tax receipts, the rest of the economy has stalled. If you want to understand British poverty, just imagine removing London from the equation. The capital, home to about 13% of the population, contributes a whopping 22% of the nation's entire economic output. Without London, the UK's per capita income plummets by 14%. For comparison, if you took Germany's wealthiest city, Munich, out of the picture, its per capita income only drops by 1%. And if the US lost the Bay Area, it would see a mere 4% dip. It's like London is the life raft keeping the UK's economy afloat, and everyone else is desperately clinging on for dear life. And just when you thought it couldn't get much worse, along came Brexit. The 2016 referendum to leave the European Union, Britain's largest trading partner, was like taking a wrecking ball to the economy. Businesses that had relied on smooth sailing with the EU suddenly faced a perfect storm of tariffs, supply chain nightmares, and a shrinking labor pool. Brexit also led to a sharp decline in immigration, further deepening labor shortages in key sectors like healthcare, construction, and agriculture. By the time COVID-19 showed up, the UK economy was already on its knees, and the pandemic only twisted the knife further. The UK spent over £340 billion on COVID support measures, more than any G7 economy except the US relative to GDP. The economic fallout from these decisions becomes even more cringeworthy when compared to the UK's former colonies. In 2022, India's GDP leapfrogged the UK's, hitting $3.5 trillion, while Britain's GDP limped behind at $3.2 trillion. And it's not just India. Singapore now boasts a GDP per capita nearly double that of Britain, and Australia consistently outshines the UK in innovation and quality of life rankings. Britain, once the heart of an empire on which the sun never set, is now struggling just to keep the lights on. The UK's economic challenges are as daunting as climbing Everest in flip-flops. The government faces an almost impossible task reducing debt without raising taxes or further gutting already stretched public services. It needs to get the workforce back on track, supercharge productivity, and navigate a global landscape of high inflation and rising interest rates. The UK economy, once a roaring lion, now feels more like a tired old cat napping in a patch of sunlight, wondering where it all went wrong. The real question now is whether this nation can face its problems head-on and make the tough choices needed to regain its footing, or if it'll just keep limping along hoping for a miracle. Because, let's face it, waiting for the glory days to come back might be the most British thing of all. If you enjoyed this video, or just feel a bit better about your own country's economy, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. And if you've got thoughts on how Britain can turn things around, let's hear them. It's not like we're short on ideas or humor. See you next time.